Welcome to Maps and Meta-Analysis.
Looking at California cities. Hi, I'm Darvesh Borhe.
And I'm Justin Hurst, and this is Facts in Folsom,
a meta-analysis.
All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Maps and Meta-Analysis. This is an interview that we're doing to follow up on the last episode, City Council debrief. We have with us Taryn Grows, who is one of the people that was involved with the big item on the agenda. So if you're comfortable, Taryn, please tell us a little bit about your business, about yourself, and what you hope to get out of your business.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys both so much for having me and taking a vested interest in what it takes to open a business. The first thing I will say before I do anything else is it is a challenge to open a business, let alone in California, but anywhere. And my very good friend Shalisa, she always used to say it's an act of bravery when you're trying to start a business. So I want to just commend anybody listening to this podcast. If you're ever thinking about opening a business, if you've ever been in the face of something going, I could take this idea and just make this on this big macro scale, just really, really do your research. That is the first cautionary tale I will say as we get into this thing. So that being said, my name is Taryn Grows. I am the co-founder of Uncle Charlie's Firehouse and Brew. We are a firefighter and first responder themed brewery, and kind of the impetus of this entirety of our business happened about a decade ago. I actually started BJ's Brew House, which is a nice retail location and restaurant chain. You can find primarily all over California. They have some spots in Nevada, Texas, a couple other places like that. I was on the opening crew for BJ's, and we used to brew all of our beer in-house. So I kind of fell in love with the idea of craft beer culture early on in my early drinking time frame. And then I went to work for the corporate offices, became a corporate trainer, really got to see how community oriented beer could be. And my dad and I always kind of shared a love of craft beer. And it was one day sitting at a brewery and I just go, Pop, I think we could do this. I think we could actually make beer and do it for a living. And that was about 10 years ago. And we started by taking some classes. Actually, UC Davis Extension, they offered a really great program. It's now one of the most competitive programs in the entire world for brewing. But back when we started, it was really easy. You just signed up and got in. So we brewed together. And then my dad ended up purchasing a 26-gallon linear system. For those who may or may not be familiar with brewing systems, it primarily, a lot of gravity is needed when you're actually taking beer and hot liquor, and then you're gravity feeding it to the other pots that you're basically siphoning down your wort, which is beer before it's fermented. It gets very technical, but I was too short to reach the tippy systems. That's what they called it. So my dad purchased what's called a linear system. It's a little bit more of a pickle to navigate, but we like a good challenge. So we have been brewing together primarily in my dad's garage for about a decade now. We have a lot of friends and family in the who are beer enthusiasts, and they were really egging us on. So we joined beer clubs, and I'm fast forwarding about a decade, but we're in this place right now. And I know we'll get a little into the history of how we got here, but we're in this place right now where we have a potential opportunity to open this as a full-fledged business. So it went from this ideation of I like what beer does and how it brings people together, and us sitting here at this precipice going, we're about to maybe open something in Folsom that is going to bring community together. So that is how we got our start. It's all about community.
That's awesome. I'm kind of curious, where did you learn about the steps of starting a business? Because I think this is something that's often daunting for a lot of people who, might have kind of an entrepreneurial inclination. So do you have like friends and family that started businesses? Did you just read about it online? What was your exposure, and how did you learn about those like first steps?
Yeah. So first and foremost, a majority of my actual professional career that pays the bills has been spent in chamber world. So for those not familiar with a chamber of commerce is a group that primarily focuses on primarily smaller businesses, but definitely medium and large businesses can be involved. But it's meant to be this access point for businesses going, how do we navigate business world. And what chambers do is we align with cities and we align with other businesses to present opportunities, create connection, create opportunity really for these business owners to find like-minded people. So my professional career and endeavors were surrounded by wanting to bring people together to help with their businesses. So being a part of that, this is even while I was loving the idea of starting a brewery, I fell really in love with just small business owners and the idea that they could take something that they were passionate about and want to grow it into something else. I would say no matter what the industry is, and I've worked in a variety of industries alongside other business owners, from financial to real estate, brick and mortar retail locations, restaurant locations, government contracting, you name it. I have had my hands in it in some capacity. To start a business, there is a lot of actual legal components to this. So the beautiful thing about the internet these days is if you want to start a business, I mean, for Chat GPT, it could write you an entire business plan. That was not the case when I wanted to start this. So I really got in the nature of wanting to know people's stories. I'm very curious by nature, and I would ask business owners, how did you decide you wanted to do this and make this your livelihood? And then I would take their stories and I would go, okay, how is this transferable to something I want to do? A majority of people, if you want to start a business, they will find people in that industry and they will go ask them questions directly. And that's exactly what I did. So getting to know other breweries, getting to know the beer community in general. I joined beer clubs. I joined home brewers clubs. We would go to Brew Fest to meet breweries that were not necessarily in our local area. And I just started asking all the questions. How did you do this? And why did you do this? And what were the components to it? And the first thing I would say is if you're in a position with your community and you know, either from a city side, a chamber side, sitting down with people who actually process the paperwork it takes to open a business is the first step. And so if you've done your research, the next thing you want to do, because every city is a little bit different. The way Folsom does business is vastly different than Rancho Cordova or Roseville, which are just cities on the other side of us. And so being the fact that I worked at the Chamber of Commerce, I kind of already got the inside scoop. And the first thing you really have to do is have a business plan. That is your first foremost priority, because if you don't understand what you want out of your business, if you don't understand where you want to go with your business, and if you don't understand what it's going to take to make your business happen, then you have a beautiful dream with no possible way to execute. So I always look at a business plan as your little Bible. It's the thing you're going to refer back to. If you're a sports enthusiast, it's your playbook. It's the thing you need to constantly look at and go, am I on track? Am I following the things I want to follow? And am I hitting milestones that, based on other conversations I've had with other business owners, I should be hitting at this juncture? So it's really holding yourself accountable. And there's a really great resource, and we can probably link it in the podcast or however that works for you guys. But I got this great a subscription called Live Plan, LIVEPLAN. And it was this templated great way to build a business plan. And it really made it idiot proof and made me think about my steps and outlining them and things I hadn't even really thought of. Like, you know, what do you want out of the first 3 months of your business? And where do you expect to be in this first 6 months? And it really makes you put some thought behind it, because people can have great ideas, but without execution, again, they're just great ideas. So a business plan is the first thing that I leaned into. And then I took that business plan and I gave it to everybody I knew in the industry. And I go, tear it apart, tell me what's terrible about it, and tell me where I might be missing the boat on this. So asking for help was like the biggest thing I could say about how to start a business. Ask everybody.
Interesting. So like, what is the, maybe for like listeners who are not as familiar, what's like the level of detail that you would want for a business plan? Because, you know, I think with so many businesses, there is just a lot of uncertainty, right? Like you don't know, you know, you could plan as much as you want, but you don't know exactly how customers are going to respond. So, you know, are people in city council sort of receptive to that? Are they saying like, yeah, you know, we just need like a rough estimate, and, you know, we don't really care if like it hits this number exactly, just so more so that, you know, you have a good idea.
I feel like that may be jumping ahead a little bit, because the business plan doesn't necessarily have to interact with city council, right?
Well, actually, it's kind of twofold. You both are correct. So there's a level of detail that you're going to want to take some serious thought process of. And then the city council later on, when we get to that point, they do want to know. They don't want to just give some chump some like plot of land and like good luck, because it's advantageous for city entities to have some buy-in. Now, when we get to that point, I'll kind of explain why the city was so involved in our process, and they wouldn't necessarily be as involved in other people's business the way they were with ours. But that's we'll part to that. I would say get as granular as possible. And the reason I'm saying that is when you're, let's say, anything you can think of, you're baking a cake, for instance, you know what this cake is supposed to look like, right? You know, on the outside, you want some nice chocolate frosting, and on the inside, you want this beautiful yellow cake. And so you have the picture in your brain. So when you're starting to construct this cake, now for me, I'm the cheater edition. I will just buy it straight out of the box or from Safeway, because I'm not a baker by any means, but for all intents and purposes, for all illustration in this particular case, you're going to have ingredients, right? And sometimes you're looking at this cake going, this is what I want it to look like. And you've got your eggs and your flour and your sugar and all the little ingredients you know it's going to take. But let's say you're mixing up your cake batter and all of a sudden you're like, man, this thing is really, it's thick. Like this might need some little extra egg, a little extra water, a little extra oil. You don't know until you're getting in there and you're starting to make this thing. And so I would say the same thing with the business plan. Overarching, you know what you want your business to be. I wanted a brewery. That's all I knew. I knew I wanted I want a brick and mortar space that people could walk into. We could serve 5 to 10 different kinds of beers. We would have nice glassware, and we'd have a nice place for them to sit and enjoy. That was my big plan. And then you start to look a little granularly. Okay, now what is it going to take? First of all, I need a building. I need a space to put this thing. So that helps you to kind of back in to the specifics. Live plan, the reason I plug this so well is because it's literally like this live living document. My business plan, I'm not exaggerating, it's probably gone through about 500 iterations. This thing is always in progress. I've had a business plan for 10 years, and I constantly refer back. I'm about monthly, because something is always changing in my business. The more I learn, the less I know. Right. So you're going out and you're seeking information. You're like, I had no idea that was a thing I'd even have to think about. So then you have to go down this rabbit hole even more. So I think it's fine. Some great ideas I've heard. You know, I read this beautiful book called Shoe Dog it's the Phil Knight Nike story. And one of the most profound books I've ever had the pleasure of reading. And Phil Knight's idea for Nike was he got this great Stanford education. And he goes, I don't really want to do anything with what I majored in. I just really like running, and I like what it does for me, and I want to bring people along with that. And then he started wearing these shoes, and he's like, how do I make these shoes better? Right. So his business plan was literally sketched out on a little napkin, and he's like, make shoe better. How to do that. And then he started writing out ideas. Okay, maybe I need to go talk to a manufacturer. Maybe I need to talk to a fabricator. Maybe I need to go talk to somebody else who's smarter than me, right? So I would say from a business plan perspective, if you're just getting started, the idea is show me the cake. What do you want it to be? And then start to back in. What are the ingredients you're going to need to make that cake happen? And then you go seek those answers. And I tell you, my business plan is probably about 150 pages right now.
Wow.
It's very detailed and constantly changing.
Well, it's good to know that it's actually like a useful document, and that it's not just like some piece of like busy work that you're like submitting.
No, because also, just a little quick sidebar, the reason it helps you on this, like when your brain is overwhelmed with like, oh my God, there's so much to think about, it really gives you a formulative process to do it in a concise way where you're like, okay, now I can just kind of put it in a space where I'm like, well, I can't do this thing over here, you know, down at the very end. I can't tell you the actual colors of the glassware I'm going to have until I know what kind of beer I'm going to make. Right. And then I don't know the kind of beer I'm going to make until I know the actual equipment that I'm buying. And I don't know the equipment I'm buying until I know how much money I have. And I don't know how much money I have until I know how much money I need. So it kind of, in a flow state, it makes you and forces you to go, how do I look at each thing siloed so that the big picture can fully come together? Because that's the thing. That's where a lot of businesses fail. They're like, we just want this big thing. We want the cake. And you're like, great. You had no thought process but behind what it was going to take.
Yeah.
So it does make you, it forces you to kind of get you into a very comfortable space of like distilling down exactly what you're going to need. And every business needs that, every single one. I don't care who you are. Even if you're buying a franchise where it's turnkey, you still have to have a lot of granular stuff in place for that to be a bona fide business.
So it sounds like it's been more or less a constant process over the last decade. But over that time, do you feel like there have been significant milestones or hurdles that have happened at maybe more specific times?
Absolutely. You know, I think you get to a point where you've got a pretty good idea of what it's going to take to get your business going. And especially if you've made good connections and relationships, I will constantly refer back to this. Your connections and your relationships mean everything to your business. And I said this working at the chamber, and I continue to believe in it. You cannot business alone. You can be an entrepreneur, and that's a very, that can be a very lonely process in entrepreneurial world, right? Because you're just alone with your thoughts and nobody to bounce it off of. But there's not a whole lot of original ideas anymore. There's a lot of like, I want to take this idea and just make some kind of iteration of it. So for me, the connections that I made in the beer world were like, that was the most beautiful thing I could have done for myself, because it also showed a level of interest, and people want to share. As humans, we want to share knowledge. So that transfer of knowledge became this beautiful gift that other business owners who had gone through it were willing to share with me. So I think some of the milestones that I looked at is, I have this idea for my brewery. I would go meet with these brewery owners who were already doing what I wanted to do. And the benchmarking for me was, great, I need to know who's going to make my beer equipment, because that is going to be a huge part of this. That's a huge cost. And that is how my product gets made. So one of the milestones was going to basically do some research and interview people who make the beer equipment to make your beer, and vetting out if that was going to be, if these people were going to work, if I had a good rapport with them. Is this something transactional? Is it relational? I'm relational by nature. So it was really important for me to work with other businesses that I could trust and build rapport with. And luckily, the people that are making our beer system are people I have access to, and it's not just this transactional process. So getting to know who is actually going to make our brew system was a huge hurdle in our process, because then I'm like, oh, this is tangible. I can actually do this because I have somebody that can help me get there. And then some of the other major hurdles were going to banks and constantly being denied. Just something to share here is, especially in the alcohol world, there's not a lot of females that are in these positions of wanting to become business owners. It's a very male dominated industry even today. So when I would go to sit in bank meetings, I would bring all my documentation, I would bring my business plan, and I would do the pitch. And most of these bankers always looked past me, and they would look directly at my dad, and they would ask him questions. And so I got to a point where, as frustrated as I was, I realized this is just the world we live in. Now it's my job to overcome that. And so that was a huge reason why my father, who's my business partner, I asked him if I could start calling him by his name, Charlie, in business meetings. So then it looked more equitable. So that was another hurdle, overcoming that process of like, this is not going to be this equitable experience for my dad and I together. This is going to be a very siloed experience, even though we're coming in it as business owners together. Getting denied by banks who are like, we love your idea, you just have no money and you have no experience to back this up. Fun fact, banks want you to have money before you can ask them for money. They want to know how they're getting paid if you fail. So don't be discouraged. I got told no a lot by these banks. And that was a huge overcoming that, embracing the suck and just going, okay, like, as many times as I was told no, I know somebody out there is going to want to give us some cash for this thing. And some of the other hurdles which we're going to get into, I'm sure, is finding a location. That was my number one challenge in this entire thing, because I have a very specific niche. I have a very specific area I wanted to go, and there was not currently zoning in the city I wanted to go into that would allow for me to brew beer. So that in and of itself was an entire process.
Gotcha. And so maybe that's a good time to kind of pivot to, what brought about this interview in general. What was at what point did you start having to interface with the city of Folsom? Like, obviously the appeal is one example. You kind of alluded to other examples where, people might review your business plan. There was also some notes in that meeting of you had to meet with the historic commission and make sure that any kind of changes you were making fit with kind of the desires of the historic commission to like preserve the aesthetics of that location. So could you walk us through the different times you had to interface with the city of Folsom and kind of what that experience was like?
Absolutely. So the space alone was going to create a lot of challenges in like for the brewing. Doesn't matter anywhere. I could have gone to any other city and I would have been faced with a challenge of I have to have a location that is not only big enough to accommodate a large brewing operation, but also tall enough of ceilings to accommodate very big equipment that would manufacture. So manufacturing in California is highly regulated, right? We have a lot of environmental impacts that we have to be mindful of, and we have a state that really takes that seriously. So it really gave me a directive on the places I could and could not think about putting this brewery. I looked at about 50 places, specifically in Folsom, that I had thought would make a great brew space. And they were all at that juncture privately owned buildings, or they were commercially owned property by big commercial entities. So that in and of itself became problematic because you're dealing with people who may not necessarily have a vested interest in what the city and what the vitality of the city is looking for. They're just looking at their bottom line and they want to know how much money are they going to get paid. So when you're looking at big warehouse space, there's a lot of considerations you have to have. And a lot of this stuff kind of weeded itself out for my dad and I. That didn't exist in Folsom. We have a family legacy in Folsom. My family's been here since 1956. My grandfather owned a business in Folsom. He had a campground on Folsom Lake. My grandmother was a teacher in Folsom, and they're both buried about a mile from where our brew location is looking to go. So we have some legacy here, and it was really important for me to capitalize on legacy. And there was a space I had my eye on in the historic district of Folsom, and I put a bid on it about 8 years ago when the city council was a whole different group of people and we had a different city manager. And I put a little email together when I first got my job at the chamber, and I said had my eye on this space, and they laughed. They're like, "Oh, that's funny. There's no way we would ever allow for a rezoning of a space, let alone a brewery." So I kind of let that dream die. Enter COVID. And I was still working for the Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development. I saw the numbers from the city of these businesses that were closing, brick and mortar locations, and knowing full well that sales tax revenue was going to be problematic and we were going to need to eventually look at how we were going to reinvigorate this community once COVID was over and businesses were opening back up. So I got brave and went out to the new city council and the new city manager, and I said, "Hey, would you reconsider letting me put a bid in for this space?" And unsolicited, I put together a 9-page proposal. And they literally said, "Taryn, that was so good. We think anybody that wants to go in the space should have to put together a proposal." So actually, I kind of incriminated myself because now I open their eyes to, oh, wow, we really can have some new ways of thinking how we're going to generate sales tax revenue in Folsom. So that was my first real interfacing with the city. It was a piece of property in a building that belonged to the city of Folsom. So let alone that was going to be the landlord. And then enter Historic District Commission, which Darvesh, you had alluded to. The location we were looking to go in historic Folsom has some of its own little laws and regulations outside of what most of Folsom would experience, because we have such a healthy legacy of history and vibrancy in this area I was looking to go. So people take it very seriously when you're trying to build a new business here. The irony in all this is the location I'm trying to put this brewery is not historic. It was built in 2008. So it actually does not fall within the historic district confines of keeping a space in its historic space, quote unquote, or in its historic state, quote unquote. Where that came in is we have some very passionate people who have started their own groups to preserve the history of Folsom, who felt strongly that whatever business was going to go into the city space should embody what the historic district already was, which is a great community that would bring more people in together, that really revolves around retail, shopping, restaurants, and some civic amenities as well. So it was important for these groups and the Historic District Commission's job, because the city has a lot to deal with. They are a segmented group that has been basically appointed by the city to go, whatever happens in this district, you guys make some decisions, bring it to us, and we'll basically back you up. And that's what we had to do. Hoop number one was the city came out with this RFP. It was 96 pages. After I had submitted my 8-page proposal, they came out with a 96-page RFP, and they said any business that wants to go into this historic district parking garage, which was built in 2008, should have to put together a proposal. My proposal was about 52 pages in retort to their 96 pages. And then 50 other businesses went up for that space as well. And so we had to go do some presentations in front of the Folsom Historic District Association, some of these other historic groups, because we needed their buy-in, because we knew we were going to have to appeal to these people. And our business was selected out of those 50 businesses for a variety of reasons. And then the Historic District Commission was really hoop number two. Getting selected was hoop number one. Hoop number two was the Historic District Commission, where we had to go present in front of. The reason we did is they wanted to make sure our business aligned with their vision, and that the rezoning of the space so we could manufacture beer was in line with the current environmental impacts that may come up for this historic area. And then that unanimously was decided that, yes, you guys fall into all these categories, you're fine. And then the third interfacing came with this appeal, which legally in Folsom, if the historic district approves something, there's a 10-day appeal process where the city puts out a notice. They say, you have 10 days as the public to appeal this if you want to. And on the 10th day, our project was appealed. And that's what led us to the appeal part. Super fun.
With specifically the Historic Commission, how much back and forth was there between you and the commission? And then also, I know that they introduced a lot of stipulations for your business. So how did that come about?
We like to call it stipulations, Justin, in the drinking world, stipulations, if you will.
Stipulations, I like that.
Stipulations, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So for the Historic District Commission, they have some pretty in Folsom, they take any kind of collusion pretty seriously. So the Historic District Commission are appointed by city council members, and there was a Historic District Commissioner who also has a business on Sutter Street, who I happen to be friends with. He had to actually recuse himself from voting the day that I came in and presented, because we have a friendship outside of this, and they wanted it to be this equitable experience and for it to be fair, basically, for not to be this one-sided thing. So as far as back and forth with Historic District Commission, I really didn't have to go back and forth with them too much prior to meeting with them the day of our hearing. I did have to work very, very closely with our planning department. So basically, in order to get in front of Historic District Commission, and I apologize, I glossed over this, but in order to be selected as part of our 52-page proposal in response to the 96-page appeal, we had to do a lot of research. We had to do elevation drawings, which we secured an engineer to do. This basically tells the city that what you're trying to put in here is feasible and it won't cause external damage or internal damage to the building. We had to secure signage plans and signage permitting. I had to do a lot of research and understanding what signage would be permitted in Historic Folsom and make sure that our brewery would be in alignment with that. And again, working with the planning department was instrumental, because that's who I mainly did a lot of back and forth with. I became very good friends, or I became good rapport partners, if you will. I guess you wouldn't really call us friends. I thought we were friendly because we emailed pretty much 15 times a day, where they would say, hey, Taryn, we see this in your elevation drawing, but we need to know specifically, what does this mean for the internal structure of the building? And so we did a lot of that. My engineer was heavily involved with planning as well, because they want to know anything that you're doing inside their building is going to basically not compromise the integrity of the building. So from a Historic District Commission standpoint, not a lot of back and forth. From a planning standpoint, a lot of back and forth. I'm talking probably a good 3 months worth of just making sure they had every answer to every question they needed from me. And then once planning feels comfortable, then they sign off, and then you go in front of the Historic District Commission. So it was quite the process.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
So I guess with that, you already kind of alluded to this, but maybe you could go into a bit more detail. Is kind of when and how did you find out about the appeal? You sort of mentioned that you found out on the 10th day. There's like this 10-day window. But what was did you just like get an email and then like the city is just like, hey,
You
like
know,
there's an appeal.
they actually sent up a bat signal and they go, Taryn, this sucks for you. And it was just looks like the big bat wings in the sky. No, they were wonderful because we were already working so entrenched and so closely with them. They were very on top of it, like on the 10th day, and they forewarned me. They said there's a very good probability your project will get appealed because in the same district where I am trying to build my brewery, there is another business at the other end of the block that is already an existing building that wanted to be turned into a tap house. And although they are not manufacturing beer, there are some environmental implications they had to navigate. They had to do some kind of rezoning themselves. And that kind of ruffled a lot of feathers for some specific groups in around the historic district who were like, we've got too much alcohol on Sutter Street. We really don't want this here anymore. So the city is very hypersensitive to what the people want and what they're looking for. And with this other project, that was already about 18 months in front of our project, we knew we were kind of following suit with them. So when they got the okay to get the rezoning, then we got the okay to get the rezoning. When they got appealed, we knew we were probably going to get appealed. And we found out on the 10th, when that 10th day, this basically the second the appeal came in, I got a phone call and an email to let me know, Taryn, this appeal happened, and here's now the process moving forward. So it's a very specific process. I don't know about every city, but Folsom has a very, very specific process when you get appealed. That basically they take it's not cheap to appeal, by the way. It's about $495 to write an appeal against any project. Mind you, for me to apply for a application fee to potentially put our business in there and look at rezoning, that's a $5,000 fee. So it is not cheap when we're talking finances. And I need to be very transparent here because it's not cheap to even think about starting a business. And this is where a lot of people get scared off. I knew going into this, it was going to cost money. I had no idea it was going to cost this amount of money. So it was about the time alone, Justin, is, I mean, that is your biggest commodity and that's what you think you have plenty of. But I mean, I basically was working 2 jobs at this point. I was working my actual daytime job. And then at nights and on weekends, I was devoting a lot of energy to doing a lot of research, asking a lot of questions and making sure I knew exactly what was going down the pike. And let me just, right now, I'm going to dispel anything anybody may be thinking. Nobody knows what they're doing. Like just point blank. I'm a new business owner. There are existing business owners. We're all making it up as we go along. And if COVID taught us anything, it's that new regulations will come and you're going to have to navigate that. And old stuff's going to go out the window. Like everyone is just making it up. Unfortunately, there are some entities that have a lot more power and control over it. And so you just have to be very malleable. You just have to know that when you think something's going to go a certain way, chances are it won't. And I would say keeping your head on a swivel and having an understanding that a no is just a redirect. It's not necessarily like your business is not going to work. It's a redirect to go, how can you get creative and reimagine how you're going to go about getting your business to work? So I got a lot of no's in the last 10 years. For me, it was all redirecting me to looking at something different. So with this appeal, that's what was given to me was, hey, this gentleman appealed you. Mind you, he spent money, right? So he has a vested interest in why this probably shouldn't happen here. His appeal was about 45 pages. So the gentleman was doing a lot of his own research too. A lot of has to do with CEQA, which is the California Environmental Quality Act. A lot of environmental implications, like I had already mentioned, was brought up in the context of manufacturing, brewing beer, because it's industrial. So from an appeal standpoint, what happens is I was given the letter and then I get a chance to kind of look at all the grievances in the letter. And then I get to develop my own retort to those grievances. And then you make this is actually a public hearing. So the public in the community is allowed to come involved with this. So if you'd like me, I can kind of walk you through what the appeal looked like and the formality of it, unless you guys had any questions before I start that.
That's fine with me. I think that's a good idea. Sounds great for our listeners.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
you could just kind of outline like, the broad contours, like I think that would be super helpful. I
Sure.
mean, obviously you don't have to get into like whatever detail level that you're comfortable with. Because imagine like some.
It was 4 hours long. I will give you the Cliffs Notes version. It was a 4-hour long appeal.
Mhm.
What was really important for me and for anybody listening here, research and questions, right? I'd said that at the beginning, always asking questions. There was another appeal hearing that happened the week before ours. And I was really had nothing to do, nothing even remotely was the appeal that was happening was about senior living and housing, nothing to do with any kind of industry like we were in. But I wanted to know the cadence of the process so I could be prepared. So I went and attended that meeting. And how this works in an appeal hearing is the mayor they have their general counsel session, and then the mayor gets a chance to give the audience an overview of why we're all sitting here and what the appeal is about. And then the planning department gets a chance to get up and they go, here are the steps we took with the invested party who wanted to put this project here. And this is why we think that this project would be okay to move forward. And they basically lay out why, because they're on the hook. This is their job, is to outline why they have chosen to say yes and let this project move forward. And then the appellant, the person appealing, gets 10 minutes to come up, and they get to give 10 minutes. Either they can keep the 10 minutes for themselves, they can yield their time to other parties, maybe if they need some backup documentation, if they need some legal counsel. You have 10 minutes total as the appellant to plead your case on why you think the planning commission did their job incorrectly. And then me as the applicant, you get 10 minutes to say, this is what we went through, and this is why we think we did our job correctly in following suit with the planning. And then it goes to public hearing. Now, public hearing is an opportunity for anybody who may have some strong feelings, whether you are tied to the project or not. You get a chance, 3 minutes to get up, and you get to speak your piece about whatever this project is, either for or against. They have a bailiff in there. It's very much like a court session. So you have to stay very respectful of this process. And mind you, again, I watched somebody else's appeal hearing, so I was very privy and I was very strategic. I knew that for the 10 minutes I was going to be allocated, I wanted to yield. I was going to give my speech and then yield some of my time to people in professions, because based on the appeal letter, I got to see where the grievances were, and I got to bring in professionals who could speak to those grievances, because I was not a professional in environmental law and I'm not a professional in air quality management. So I brought in people that could speak to those things. So that was the nice thing about being given a heads up on what exactly you would have to be kind of defending in a sense. And then, the public comments, anybody can get up and speak. At our appeal hearing, we had 21 people from the public get up and talk. That's an exorbitant amount of people at 3 minutes each. We had 17 speak for our project. We had 4 speak against our project. So already right there, that kind of just tells you what you can expect from the community support or not support. And then to wrap up the appeal, the appellant gets 5 minutes to give their summary, and then the applicant gets 5 minutes to give their summary. And then the city council gets to deliberate on the spot, ask any clarifying questions, and they have to make a decision right there. And they can get to a point where potentially, if they can't reach an agreement, they can go to a closed session, and then they basically can invite you back to go part 2. So I knew what to expect, because I sat through an appeal hearing, and I'm like, I'm going to get some strategic people to come sit in the audience and to speak for us, because it's all about character and it's all about community support. And I know that's what Folsom cares about. So I put it out on social media. My friends are amazing. They got shirts made to show unification. So we all rolled in wearing these bright red shirts that said, "Keep UCFB Brewing." We look like a sea of just red support. There's about 200 people there. Mind you, city council has never had that many people in that space at all. People were pouring out into the hallways because there was no room to sit. This is the power of community, and why I feel so grateful that I had my time in the chamber is I got to cultivate that community for about 10 years. And everyone, I always shared my dream. And so the buy-in was already there, and people wanted to be part of this process with me. They want to say, in community, people want to feel like they're a part of what you're doing, because that's the again, the equitable experiences. Then they're going to be lifelong consumers and supporters of you because they helped you, quote unquote, get to where you wanted to go. So this was not happenstance. This was very strategic of how I teed this up. And it's only because I sat through that previous appeal hearing knowing what to expect. So there's a lot of people speaking to our character. There's a lot of people speaking to the environmental impact of what we were doing. I think the best asset I had in my pocket, my previous boss, who was the head of economic development, got a chance to get up and talk about the vision for Folsom and reiterate that City Council has a 2035 general plan, and it's to bring more economic vitality, and my business would certainly help to support that plan. And then the gentleman who runs the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality District also got a chance to share some information, because we had to get his sign off from an environmental standpoint about the repercussions of brewing beer. And it just so happens he also owns a brewery. So that really boded well in our favor. So we had the right people at the helm to do the work for us and in partnership with us.
When we covered the city council meeting where your public hearing was, I got there a little bit late. And the first thing I noticed was just a sea of red, and it was like hard to even get through into the building. Like, I have not seen that level of coordinated public support at a city council meeting, and I was frankly impressed. Did you have to do a lot to get that kind of support, or was it really organic once you put the word out there?
I think people want the underdog to win, and I was not shy. I have social media, you know, I have Uncle Charlie's Firehouse and Brew, which is on our Instagram. We also have a Facebook page. I have my own personal platform, and I have some pretty amazing community support and friends that I know have a lot of visibility in this community as well. And it became this organic process. I was never shy about what we were going through. I've always shared our story on platforms about every process, like just from the time we submitted the application to touring spaces to the no's from the bank. I wanted to bring people along with us. Your story is a huge part of your identity. And whether you like beer or not, it was never about the beer. The beer is just the product we make. It is about the story we are telling and asking people and inviting them in as part of that process. So I think because I already had the fortitude enough to start to do that the last decade, organically, we have a lot of support. And the second I put out, hey, we got appealed, I mean, you would have thought we were going to freaking World War III. I had my friends rolling up going, who do we need to egg a house for? And I'm like, no, there's a actual process behind this that we get to be a part of and come out and support that way. Let's show this city not only that we mean business, but you're going to support this business, and we will not be shut down. We are a city and an entity and a group of people who want to see good stuff and good stewards of these spaces to come in. And so I thought it was actually a very organic thing. I put maybe one or two little, like, hey guys, we'd love for you to show up this day. People shared it and they reshared it and they reshared it. And then it got on these public platforms like Folsom, on the Folsom Facebook pages, and the community showed up. It was beautiful. And they wrote letters for people who couldn't even show up. They wrote letters to city council. I got stacks and stacks and stacks of letters of support, which is such a testimonial to this bureaucratic process. As much of a pain in the ass it can be, you really get a lot of people coming out of the woodwork who you may not have a direct connection with going, I believe in you and I trust you and I want to see you win because I want this in my community. So I would say more organic than anything else.
Well, that's pretty awesome. I mean, that's also kind of like reassuring, I think, for other people who are considering this, that, you know, they don't need some kind of like, you know, really slick like marketing team or something to like figure this out. That like you said, if you're genuine and people buy into, you know, your vision and your idea, and
Yeah.
that, you know, ideally you're having a positive impact on other people and they can kind of see the benefit to themselves. It's not like they're just like helping someone and then they're like, oh, okay, well, like nothing's going to happen now. So.
Right. I mean, I was in a unique position where we're trying to create a community space, and we happen to have a product that really appeals to a wide demographic. So that didn't hurt. That may not always be the case. If you're like, I want to open a gas station, I mean, that might be a little bit more of a challenge for some people to get on board and go, hey man, I see your vision and I really want to get behind it. I mean, this is a little bit different, right? Like, and I'm not I'm not remiss to say that we have a lot of community support because my dad and I have poured a lot of ourselves into this community. And that was a very strategic move. When I took the job with the Folsom Chamber, I was very transparent with my boss when he hired me. And I said, my dream is to open a brewery. And he said, great, come do good things in this community and this community will support you. And he didn't lie. And this community really has showed up tenfold. But share your dream, share your vision. Put that out there, because two things happen. When you share your vision, other people get on board, or they'll challenge you. And then it elevates you to go, okay, maybe I didn't think of it that way. You never go into a business thinking you're going to have haters in the process. It's just what happens. But the more you share it, the more you get to dialogue, the more people can start to see it and understand it and feel it. And it holds you accountable. For 10 years, I have claimed I'm going to open this brewery. And for 10 years, people go, when are you opening? What's the process? Where are you at? And it was as frustrating as embarrassing, where I'm like, no, we're not anywhere near. It's been 3 years and we're still in the same spot. It held me accountable. And then when people got to a point where they're like, oh my God, she's still at this thing. Like, she's still going after a brewery. And then to see that we were getting close, they bought in, man. They're like, she's been talking about this thing for a decade now. Share your vision. People want to be a part of the process. Anything you think you're keeping, no, if you're patenting something, I can understand wanting to be a little more quiet about that, sure. But for the most part, if you want to do something big in this world, talk about it. Get people to buy into it, because those are your customers. These people, this human connection, this is the only way people are going to be successful. They need you. You need to pour into your people, your demographic, your community, whoever your target market is. Pour into them and start creating conversation, because the more you do that, the world is full of noise, and trying to stand above the noise and navigate that, and like to show up. Justin, you said it, we were in a sea of red and we showed up and we stood out, because we generated noise and then we had visibility to back that up. That was really instrumental in getting us to this point.
That's awesome. I guess switching gears a bit back to the appeal process. What did you learn from the appeal process? Obviously, you had to do a lot of preparation kind of in advance, and finding people who could either speak to the merits or lack thereof of the various arguments that the appellant was making. But like, what did you personally kind of learn from it or take away from it? Have you left with the sense of like, okay, now I'm better off for XYZ reason?
Really honest, Darbesh, I was annoyed. I was annoyed at first, because I'm like, oh my gosh, just one more thing I'm gonna have to do and spend my time, because again, your time is your currency, right? Like, this is not cheap, this is hard, this is now one more thing I'm gonna have to think about. What I learned, the two biggest takeaways, is I learned that I really I care about my business. I am willing to fight hard for my business, because I believe in what we are trying to do and what it's going to benefit. Again, it's not about the beer. The beer is just the product we make. I know the vision that I have. I know what the cake is going to look like. It's going to be this beautiful thing, and the community is going to get access to it. It's not just for me, it's for them. So it reinforced that tenfold. And secondly, it taught me that thick skin is really important to have in business. And I'm a people pleaser. I'm an enabler by nature. I always want to make everybody else happy, even at my own expense. And it really challenged me to step up and go, okay, I know you don't want this brewery here, but I'm going to tell you why this is so beneficial. And I'm going to throw my heart and soul behind this. So it reinforced everything that I knew to be true already, but just amplified that, because then I only had a very short amount of time. Once the appeal was filed, we only had like 2 weeks to get everything together before we had the appeal hearing. So it lit a fire under me to go get the right people into place, Taryn. And I started doing a lot of research. Who do I need to come to the table for this? How do I look at that 45 pages of grievances and address enough of them in a concise amount of time that is clear and answers every question somebody may have about why this brewery shouldn't be here? It really amplified my ability to find the right people. And because I had already poured into the community and had great connections, I didn't have to look far. They were really accessible to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't really have much to add, obviously. Like, I didn't go through the
That's
process.
okay.
And I guess, like throughout this whole episode, we haven't really talked about like what the appeal actually was. And we actually covered, Justin and I covered this in like a previous episode, so we're not gonna like retread
Yeah.
old ground too much. But just for context for the listeners, and correct me if I'm wrong, Taryn, but the basic argument that the appellant was making was that your business was granted some CEQA exemptions and some parking exemptions, and their kind of main claim was that you guys were sort of like not deserving of those exceptions. That like whatever conditions
Yes.
there were that allowed you guys to get those exemptions, that for kind of one reason or another they did not apply to your case in that situation. So kind of with that, and just to kind of, I guess, I don't know if steelman is like the right word, but do you think you could try to step into the appellant's shoes and try to address some of the merits of their arguments, as they might sort of defend them? And again, I mean, you don't have to go into a ton of detail. Like, obviously, the decision's already been made, so this is not like affecting any sort of material decision. But I think in this podcast, we like to do it just to, get a better sense of like it's not just this like adversarial thing. Each person is coming at it from their own perspectives and their own interests and things like that. So I'm kind of curious on like your take on the appellant's arguments.
Absolutely. And, I will say that the gentleman that did appeal us, he had some, he's very intelligent. He did his research, and I give him a lot of credit. I think what helped disarm me in this process is on page 3 of the 45-page appeal. He said, I'm loosely quoting this, and we can go back and look for sure. But he said, I really think that the brewery would be great. It looks like it's going to be a great community space. I like beer, and I'd love to be able to walk down from my house and have a great brewery there. So, and he goes, I think the owners look like they'd be good stewards of the space. So already right there, I knew out the gate, this is not about the brewery. This was about the CEQA exemptions, the process in which we were selected. He had questions. Now you have to understand the motivations of this individual. This individual is in CEQA. Like, this is his job. His job is he's a CEQA expert, and his job is to make sure that that's being basically upheld. And he happens to not work necessarily in the city of Folsom, but he is a resident here. So I think for him, he's looking at something in his own backyard going, wait a minute, I do this for a living. How come these things exist? Now, I don't fault him. I think asking questions is really good. I think especially asking questions of governing agencies really kind of keeps people accountable. So of course I could absolutely step into his shoes and go, what do I answer to? Because as the applicant, in those 45 pages and his level of granular concerns with our project, a lot of it didn't necessarily have to do with the beer, and I couldn't even speak to that. The only thing I could speak to was our business in general. What I will say is everything that the city and you guys probably already covered is because of when the timeline of when this building was built and the CEQA exemptions happening on this building was vetted out 15 years ago. So the appellant was looking for a fight on something that didn't warrant a fight. Maybe now, if that building had been built now, a lot of the stuff he said probably would have been relevant, but because it was built, it's not a historic building, but it also was built 15 years ago. At that time, it met a lot of the criteria. So we didn't have to answer to those things. And whether that's relevant now or not, that doesn't matter, because what we're looking at as the relevancy of what the space says could be there. And we fell into that category. So he did argue till he was blue in the face, and he brought up some good points. But unfortunately, when the law was made and when this building was built, there was an exemption, and he could not argue that. And the city goes, it doesn't matter that this is what it's doing now. This does not fall under that because of the time frame in which this was built and how it was done. Same thing with parking. It's a huge known fact in the historic district that parking is a challenge. Is it a problem? No. There are ample parking spaces. They've done tons of parking studies. Is it an inconvenience? Absolutely. There are places on Sutter Street and in the historic district that you may have to park a little further from that's not directly accessible. During COVID, a lot of getting creative happened where parking spaces that were delineated originally in front of other existing businesses turned into parklets to create outdoor space, which is beautiful. I mean, it's vibrant. It brings a lot of community out, and people love to sit outside, and we have great weather for the most part. So we did lose some parking spaces in that. Where my project is located happens to be in a parking garage. So right then and there, as inconvenient as parking could be in the historic district, and as many cars as I would like to think are going to come in for our brewery when we're open, we are literally located inside a parking garage that is never at capacity. I think I read in a parking study in the last 15 years, it's only been at capacity twice. That's an inconvenience, not a problem. And honestly, the more people coming to the district to spend money, not really a problem, if you ask me, on the big scale things. So yeah, could I step into the appellant's shoes and understand what he was addressing? Sure. Did it warrant a 4-hour, very expensive appeal process? No, I don't think so. I think it's something he could have gone behind closed sessions with city council members as they reiterated and said, we wish you would come to us as opposed to continually appealing, because this is not the first time this gentleman has appealed for this exact process either.
Interesting.
You sharing that, yeah.
I was just going to ask like a couple of, I guess one comment and then like maybe one follow up. I think maybe the reason that a lot of these appellants try to do it publicly is because you probably saw this in the case of the retirement home that was going to be built on, I believe, it was East Bidwell. Just right before like the actual like city council chambers.
I think it was Natoma.
Yeah, Natoma. Sorry. Yeah, it was well.
It's actually right across from the prison.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think in those circumstances, it seems like having it out in the public is quite helpful to the appellant's case. But like in that case, even though I think the developer ended up being approved, like I think it was a 4-1 vote still. It seemed like the public support was, on the appellant's side. So I suspect that maybe that's why people default to doing these sorts of things in public, is that maybe they feel like, okay, this is, if I really just went in closed sessions, this is like very in the weeds and, super like a super dry subject. But if I can make it this kind of, battle for the soul of Folsom or something like that, then maybe I can kind of muster more support than I would.
It's the human condition to want to get people to rally behind you. This is why what happens on social media, and people love to jump in and fight each other on social media, right? Because they're keyboard warriors. And I love it. I love that we have a bureaucratic process and this judicious process, if you will, that allows people to come in and they talk and fight about the things that they love. I am for that all day, because again, it reinvigorated my love and just reinforced why I'm doing what I'm doing. And frankly, it was free marketing for me. So I could thank the guy, because I got a lot more traction than I probably would have if I had just put an ad in a paper or, some digital, sponsored thing. So I don't disagree with that. The challenge here though, gentlemen, is you have to look at the process. So when you're looking from a legal standpoint, this is why the city council does what it does. We have an incredible mayor right now, and I will give her so many accolades. When that senior housing project you're referring to for the first appeal hearing that I sat through, she said something in a matter of 2 minutes that would have put the whole thing, would not have had to go for that 4.5 hours it did. She said, I may not like this process either. I happen to be a resident in Folsom, and where I live, I don't want this senior housing thing here either. But the law says this land is privately held. The gentleman sold it to this entity. The entity had every right to purchase it legally. They went through all the nuances from getting a conditional use permit. They went through all the nuances of navigating this appeal. And frankly, the state of California now comes down to the city and says, you legally have to have X amount of low-income senior housing per capita. And if you don't, you are held fiscally responsible, which meant that Folsom was on the hook. If they had denied this appeal, if they had approved the appeal, Folsom would have been on the hook for over $6.8 million. That is fiscally irresponsible for the city to go, just because some other residents have a problem with it, we cannot hold everybody hostage to this. And that's just the legalities of it. So as much as I agree, there is something beautiful about the human condition of wanting to come alongside something and fight for or against something they do or do not appreciate. The law is the law. And for this particular case with the CEQA, this is now the multiple times this gentleman had brought this up. And they're like, look, this is the law. We followed it. You can dispute that all day till you're blue in the face. We didn't do anything illegal. Let's talk about it behind closed doors and stop making it such this thing, because what it's doing is it's eating staff time, it's eating progress, it's eating all this stuff for breakfast that literally has no business being eaten for breakfast because legally there is no recourse here. So I get it. It's just law is the law. It should be challenged when merited, but after like 3 or 4 times of being told the same thing, you are now held accountable for your actions, continuing to fight over the same thing, going, you're going to be told the same thing again, and now you're wasting everybody's time. So
Before we get into the final thoughts for this interview, it really feels like some of the underpinning conversation here has really been about the big idea of what does the future of Folsom look like for businesses. And especially, I think there's some elements there of people like in the younger generation that we belong to. How do young up and coming business owners get to the point where they can start a business in Folsom? Do you feel like that the city of Folsom, as it stands right now with all its policies and the way that this whole process worked for you, is presenting barriers to young business owners that want to start a business? And if so, like, how would you envision potentially changing that?
I think because I'm such a proponent of just business in general, way before I even owned my own business, I believe in the entrepreneurial spirit. And there's a reason that America is what it is, because we didn't like the way that we were being treated amongst in these other countries. And we're like, let's have freedom of self, freedom of thought. And so we came and we, you know, our ancestors came over here, and now there's a lot of nuance in that, and I won't get into that, but the idea is that there's freedom to go and to build, but there are restrictions on how that freedom is exercised. So for any future business owner, especially in Folsom is changing rapidly. It is not this. Now, some of the processes a little antiquated. I may agree. That is not through anyone's fault. I mean, we have a lot of moving parts, and unfortunately, it is a challenge to get people to want to work in government because it's hard and it's bureaucratic, and you have to follow certain guidelines, and that's challenging for a lot of people. So we don't necessarily have the staffing at the city level that I think the city would love to have to be able to help people navigate this a little bit easier. It is a lot of looking for stuff on your own, and you're going to be in the pipeline waiting. If you have questions from the city, it's not always this direct access thing. Now, I feel like I laid a lot of groundwork in the 10 years working through economic development in the Chamber of Commerce, where I made some good connections, and I absolutely utilized those connections to my advantage. And I didn't have to wait probably as long as other people might have to wait if they were coming along behind me. But that was a strategic move on my end. I knew exactly what I would need to do in order to be able to get what I wanted. And I don't skirt away from that. I openly admit that. But what that also meant that I had to pour a lot into other business owners. I poured into Folsom. So it's mutually beneficial. It wasn't just this one-sided thing. So any business, any entrepreneurial spirit, younger generation, whatever, older generation, a lot of people changed careers during COVID too, and they wanted to try something different. Folsom may have some challenges, but every city has challenges. And I think being at the precipice of something beautiful, like wanting to open this brewery and getting zoning changed and navigating appeals and watching other businesses fail and still wanting to step into that, I think that has a lot to do with just my fortitude and how I'm built. So entrepreneuring is not for everybody. And you learn that pretty quickly in this. So you're going to fail a lot, and you're either going to be like, no, thanks, not for me, or you're going to persevere and go, cool, I made it something pretty amazing. And I've grown some thick skin in this process. So I would say, does the city have its challenges, and will I absolutely help the city wanting to navigate that moving forward? Yes. Can I take what I've learned? My agenda at our appeal hearing was about 300 something pages. About 150, 200 of those pages were my project alone. I've done a lot of work, and that was all. I look at this now as my manifesto of what it took, but that was 10 years of just being diligent. It's going to take time. And the problem is we live in a society that really demands immediacy. You're not going to get it. You're not going to get it in California. I don't know if you're really going to get it in any state trying to open a business, especially brick and mortar, especially alcohol-based business. That's a challenge, but I knew what I was up against because I did my research, I made connections, and I built a community alongside me that helped me navigate what that would look like. I don't ever want to deter somebody from it, but just be prepared to understand that the first no as hard as that is not going to be your only no. But the beautiful part of the NO is the KNOW. I took the no and now I know. And what do I do with that moving forward? So invest in your community and it will invest back in you, but just be prepared. It's not easy.
If you had to give one piece of quick advice to any aspiring entrepreneurs, would it be that part right there?
I would say that, and also embrace the suck.
Mhm.
It's hard. It sucks your energy. It sucks when you get told no. Own it. Just tell yourself like, hell yeah. If I say this little thing too, I say there's protection in, it was rejection, but now I say there's protection and redirection, because rejection is redirection. I've gotten told no so many times. I'm like, cool, I'm still gonna pursue this brewery, but I'm gonna go this way. That door is closed. That's not for me. Awesome. Now I get to go look over here and being super creative. 8 years later, if you had told me when I got the first no from the city going, thanks, but no thanks, I could have let it die, but I pursued this thing. And here I am. I mean, we got the appeal denied unanimously. We are now in lease negotiations with the city. I'm looking to potentially sign paperwork tomorrow, if not Monday. Like, I persevered and my community came alongside me and said, we got your back, girl. You just get this thing done. That protection and redirection took me 8 years to get back full circle to where I am. But I know more about my business now, especially going through this appeal process, especially in the last 3 months, than I knew in the 10 years leading up to this. So I am grateful for that no and that redirection and the rejection. Embrace the suck.
Wow. That's
Well, thank you so much for all of this. So this was a very informative interview for all of our listeners. Do you have any places that you want to plug where people can follow up with your business, maybe hear about when it's opening, or just you personally?
Yeah, I mean, you're welcome to follow on Facebook and Instagram. It's Uncle Charlie's Firehouse and Brew. I know it's a mouthful. But those are the places we'll be doing updates. I'm renovating our website. I'm getting a new logo. All these things that, you know, are the fun, creative parts of opening a business. That's the stuff I really relish and love. And unfortunately, I've just been so entrenched in the bureaucratic BS, frankly, of the process that I haven't gotten to give myself a lot of that creative time. So as much as I'm working on all that, please stay privy on Facebook and Instagram right now, Uncle Charlie's Firehouse and Brew. And the other thing I'll say is just support your community. Anytime you can buy local, anytime you can shop local, anytime you can eat local, anytime you can drink local, those sales tax dollars mean something. It means something for you as residents. It means something for this community at large. And so it's really important that you're supporting your local community. And especially if you're going to become a business owner, if you expect people to support you, you got to give it back tenfold, because it's all about reciprocity.
Well, yeah, and we'll be sure to, like, you know, put all the links and stuff in the description. So you know, even if you didn't catch the name or something, we'll just put a link so that, you know, you could follow it there, or, you know, wherever you're listening.
Cool. Appreciate it. Thank you guys.
Yeah, I don't know, Justin, did you have any like final thoughts or?
No, I think that was awesome. Thank you so much, Taryn, for a great interview.
Yeah,
this
thank you
was
guys. I
seriously,
appreciate you.
this seriously, like,
Hopefully
yeah,
I didn't scare everybody. That was not my objective. I don't want to scare everybody, but
I feel like the tone is pretty inspirational, you know. And
you know what, Darvesh, I would like to think so. I mean, there are days where I cried a lot and I was like, why am I doing this? And then there are days where you get the little mini victories and you see 200 people rolling in red shirts and you're like, this is why I'm doing this. It's not about me. It's about everybody else too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that amount of support was crazy. I thought I'd like missed something, because I remember like
Wear
like,
red to
what?
the city council day.
Yeah, it's so funny because it happens like every city council meeting. I think like, oh, okay, this one's gonna be a sleeper, and then like
Yeah.
one way or the other, like some issue comes up, and you're just like, oh wow, okay, people are like very animated about this like one specific thing. And, so
it's beautiful that we have a community that doesn't stay mute, and it's also beautiful that we have a community that cares. And when they stop caring and stop showing up, that's when we really actually need to be a little more nervous. But I don't know. I just keep pouring into your community. It'll pour back into you.
gotcha. And okay, yeah, I guess with that we'll wrap up. Yeah, thanks again for tuning in. We'll be sure to put all the, you know, different socials and stuff in the. We'll also what was that thing you said at the beginning? It was like live plan or live plan?
Oh,
like
yeah,
LIV?
live plan.
Live plan.
Live
Okay.
plan. Definitely link that. That is the your business plan document. Again, it's $19.99 a month. I've literally been paying for it for I'm about a decade now. And it's my Bible, it's my playbook, constantly referring back to, and I will just say, all the knowledge I have here, it's not proprietary. I have spoken at other brewing schools. I have spoken on panels before about opening businesses. I have handed my business plan over about 100 times. I have just given it freely. I said, it is yours. I may have done the work, but I want to cut down on the amount of time, because again, your time is currency. And so here's my gift to the world. You can take my business plan, dissect it. Nobody's going to do my business the way I do my business. Nobody has the knowledge that I have at this point for how to do my business specifically. So I'm okay with just handing that over. And I would love for that to be a guide for people. And hopefully you can find some value in that as well.
Yeah, I'm sure a ton of people would find that helpful, and that's also reassuring that like people like you are so willing to be open. I think when people usually associate business as like this kind of a cutthroat, like hostile thing, and it's like this zero sum sort of world where everyone's trying to be like, well, in every way that you succeed is a way that I am like not succeeding or something. So it's
Sure.
very encouraging to see someone who has kind of like a positive sum mindset of like, hey, no, the more I give, the more I share, the better off we'll
I
all.
have an abundance mindset, abundance, not scarcity. Believe me, there's 80,000 plus residents in Folsom. If I thought I could serve them all beer, I got a lot. I mean, that's a lot of faith. But I'm a big proponent of more breweries. Let's bring them in. They'll come for one, but they'll stay for two. We've got another great brewery here in town called Red Bus. My family and I were instrumental in helping them get up and running. And actually, Eric, who owns Red Bus, came and spoke on my behalf at the appeal. So competition breeds you to really elevate yourself. I fully believe in competition, but also there's opportunity for community in that. And it really can come back to just abundance. There is space for everybody here. There is.
Totally. Yeah, so I guess with that we'll now find. Sorry, I've like said that twice now, but like now we'll like wrap up. And yeah, I guess that's it. See you guys.
See you all next week.
All right. Thanks, guys.